Rising, and welcome to the first show of Behind the Curtain with Ade and Raan. I'd like to introduce a show we did previously with Kelly Meehan. Today on the show we have Kelly Meehan, spirit baby medium. Is that correct, Kelly?
Yep, that's me.
And how are you today?
Great.
Doing these shows, it's been wonderful to get to meet people from all over the world. And I was given a link to Kelly's work, which we found really interested. We got in contact, and here we are today on the show. Kelly, I thought by starting, if you can tell us about your work and what you do.
Yeah, so my title, Spirit Baby Medium, and I have a little funny story around that. Not really that funny, but it's a title I actually invented. It didn't exist until I brought it. And now there's a lot of people calling themselves Spirit Baby Medium, which is so fascinating how that works. And so I think I've been doing this now for probably, I think coming up to 9 years, which is like unbelievable to even, I feel like I've only been doing it for a few years on some level, but like 9 years has passed. And what was your other question?
Yeah, well, how you got into the work.
Oh, I feel like this kind of work, it's not something you think about. Like when I grow up, I'm going to be a nurse. I'm going to be a fireman. I'm going to be a spirit baby medium. It's just something you don't think about. And it just started happening when I was very young. I think I came into the world I know I came into the world very different. I noticed my perceptions around 15 years old, that I noticed that things had frequencies and conversations with me, like nature and animals, and then objects, and then people. And I really didn't know what to do with that. It was a lot of trial and error and meeting interesting people that were kind of mentoring me along the way. And then when I was opening to conception and pregnancy, it was even before that, I was studying in school, and I had this one particular experience with one of the students doing this healing session with her. My hands are on her, and I looked at her and I said, "Are you having twins, a boy and a girl?" I see them. For some reason, it just felt very clear to me. And what I realized is like, is this my imagination? And I realized everything that I thought was my imagination in my world is completely not. But how do you know, right? You just think, oh, people see this, I'm that. And so then she does a home birth and doesn't do any technologies, and nobody ever picked up that there were twins. And so she thought she was having this baby boy. And I thought, okay, I trust the mom, like she's going to have a boy. And she did have the boy first. And then after that, the little girl came. And there were other things that these children shared with me. And I just said it. And that was really the beginning of like what would be to come, like totally. Okay. And then there were more stuff around pregnancy. I would just see the energy of baby. I would connect with it visually through feelings. And I would just say what I saw. And then it was just confirmed by the mother typically. And so that's really where it began. And then I thought, oh, maybe there's something in this pre-birth communication world, which was pregnancy. And then I kind of shifted into conception, and then of course birth loss. And then it just became its own thing, really. It's just, it just is.
Yeah, it's amazing that that I've not really heard of your work before, but working with children and babies is something that's probably the most important thing that we can do right now. And it's amazing that we don't really speak enough about it, and what happens before birth, during birth, and after birth.
And here's the really great thing you just brought up. It's absolutely true. When I studied, I think 15 years ago, I learned about birth psychology, pre and perinatal psychology. I had a little overlapping in my graduate program, very little, because I wasn't really sure what that was about yet, because it's very scary, because a lot of us have foundational birth traumas. And so we don't really go there. And the before life, there's a lot of people in study with it. And I know because I'm in that energy of consciousness, but you're right. Like outside of that, I always feel like, do we have an amnesia that we don't know how to connect with our unborn? And what is that? And why has it become this thing where it's challenging, or it feels like out there? But really, it's like we're in our bodies, right? We're light beings. And then we have these other light beings in connection with it. And it's very profound. And a whole other conversation is even how we care for pregnant women is not okay in a lot of the systems around the world. And it's very heartbreaking because you really think about it. I know people are trying and they're improving, and I consider myself a birth advocate in many different ways. I really feel like such a sacred portal entrance to our reality, and it's treated as a disease or an emergency.
Yeah.
And I know women are claiming it back more and more now, especially with home birth, center birth, and really like leaving the system to go, my body knows what's that connection and how do I then do that. And so you're right, the before life is not a very it's almost there's maybe fear or scared, or again it's like I feel like an amnesia. But how do we reconnect, because it's so empowering to bring pregnancy and conception before, because that connection is real, and that connection when you move into pregnancy is just as real. And then you birth your baby, and guess what, that energy that you felt, that personality is literally the child you have. And I've seen this over so many years with thousands of people I've supported, that they're like, oh my gosh, this baby is exactly how I felt and connected with. This is their energy. Sometimes I see it, I call it a soul personality. And it is who they are. I go, the only difference is, they're maybe not in their body yet, but they're here and they're present. And so I do feel like with spirit baby communication, the spirit baby work, that more people are kind of claiming it. And is why I opened up an academy called Spirit Baby Academy to train more of the Spirit Baby intuitives, like amazing people, mostly women at this point, that are just sprinkled around the world going, yeah, I sense, I hear, and I want to support this before life, this very sacred entrance, and just be present with it.
So can you talk us through like a typical session that you might have with a mother to be? Or do you work with women before pregnancy as well?
So I work with actually a majority of the women I'm supporting right now is conception, preconception,
Okay.
typically challenges, struggles.
Yeah.
Not all, but highly like, I can't get pregnant. What's wrong with me? Energy. And I really look at the little bit of the physical, emotional, spiritual, energetic. And so I wish I had my little paper here. I have a method, and I've shared this openly. I have a paper. This is a method I've created because I know I'm an information person. I receive information, and I what I call is I give like intuitive advice, but I trust the intuition of people. And the other day I realized I'm like a metaphysician somehow. And so, because I do the medical intuitive kind of connecting in there, because it's the language of energy is very easy for me. It's obvious to me. It doesn't feel like I'm actually doing much, to be honest. And I've realized this the more that I grow. It's like, oh, since I was little, I could never get school right, like books and like numbers and letters, but I could read energy like a fine art. And so in my sessions, what I like to do is I like to, and I work with birth loss too. So a high percentage of women I see have either early loss, later loss, sometimes even infancy loss after life, but typically miscarriage is a very big area to conception for me. And it's what's coming in, and I'm listening to what's coming in. Pregnancy too, typically if they're staying along this journey with me. But yeah, that's the majority. So I have a paper, and it has a picture of a person on it. And I like to look at the energy of the person in a certain format. And I bring them through an exercise, and I have an intention, like, what are you doing here? What's happening? And I tell them, I don't need anything that you don't want to share, because I'll see things anyways. It doesn't really matter. And then I just listen to their voice, and I just tune into their energy. I don't do video unless I'm teaching classes, because I don't need to see the person. I mean, I see their energy. So again, remember, it's obvious to me. And then what I do is I invite baby energies. Are there baby energies? What do they look like? Who's here? Who's coming in? And my intentional energy over these years, people will say, well, do I have a baby? If you're coming to me, you do. That's my agreement with the other side. If there's a child somewhere, there's something happening. Are they coming into Earth world? I always say there's potentials and possibilities, but I don't promise or guarantee anything. I'm not a fortune teller. Yes, I could time travel a little bit, but I'm not going to predict future things, because energies change so rapidly that things could be in one moment and they shift. And so when I'm in communication with babies in that session, then I just get information and I share, oh, is it a boy, is it a girl, baby being? Oh, sometimes there's twins. Oh, I could tell sometimes one's through miscarriage, one's through termination. And then we just have this conversation and we compare notes.
Yeah.
And it's different for everybody. Sometimes it's the individual woman, and sometimes it's in partnership, whether it's same-sex couple, whether it's, a heterosexual couple. It's all kinds of people that come around the world. Yeah.
Hmm.
Do the babies, before they're born, do they communicate reasons why they want to incarnate at this time?
That's a really good question. I think individually, that could be a good place for parents to go into. Like, if people are asking me that, it's a very big question, right? Because I'm very careful on my words, because our left-brained world and energy really grabs onto something like, oh, this child's coming in to be a healer. They're coming in to be a creator, an inventor, maybe a peacekeeper, a system buster. And then I feel like the parents hold that, like that's their mission. And so I always kind of feel like, yeah, we all come with different missions, right? But also our purposes may change. So
Yeah.
again, the language to me is really important. And so, of course, like when we sit back as adults, I'm sure you both kind of in your own reflection. Remember, you were both one spirit baby beings too. Like coming back now into this reality, I'm like, okay, I guess I'm a healer. I'm like, do I claim that? Because I'm the caretaker and the teacher. But I don't know, my mom wasn't a spirit baby communication with me, but I'm sure there was a theme in that field. And I do see people, like, especially in pregnancy. In conception, I don't go there. In pregnancy, we can look at more of a theme. I feel it's just different. Again, it's the pressure and the energy around what's this baby and who are they? And of course there's levels of mystery, which I think we need to invite in. To not know everything is really important. Because even with my sons, I was like, I don't want to claim to know everything about the soul and the starlight energy they brought to me and the inner visions before. And then who they are now is like, they're, I feel like they're part star, part earth, and they're figuring it out. We're all kind of doing it together with, I want to say, with some remembrance in there somewhere, right? Which may come later. It's a different experience. So yeah, that's how I would, look at it.
So what would you say when working with a parent, is it usually individual goals, or is there maybe is one of the goals how to welcome the baby into the world?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's very different for each person. Like if somebody comes and they have like just the kind of pop-in sessions, which is very different, and people do the longer work with me, I actually do see them become pregnant. And I'm not claiming to make them pregnant. There's something about the energy that, like, let's go deeper. Let's look around at the energy. Let's see what's really happening. And some people have lineage stuff, which feels like out of your control. And some people have like current past wounds. Everything really with issues with conception always has to do with the past. It's never about the future. And we're all walking around with so much past energy, and it's hard not to. And so what we say that you said again, it just slipped my mind. So you're asking
about welcoming.
Oh yeah. So yeah, the welcoming part. So yeah, in the sessions, I want the people to not just get the information, but then what's the next step? What does it look like? And so when I'm connecting with babies specifically, we'll look at what are ways that baby communicates with you. And I've had some really funny things come up. I was like, this one woman, I was like, why is the baby talking about knitting? And people think, oh, we just have to sit and like, be in lotus position and meditate. No, knitting is a meditation. And so baby's in communication in that way, or through music, or through art, through gardening even, or even just randomly, baby can be in communication without having to slow the left brain down, right? To slow the mental energy. And so I like to resource them with ways, because it's really not about me in communication with what they're creating. They're co-creating with their child, and it's really about them and me helping them inspire and believe that they have that connection. Because again, I know the language of energy, and most people live in a lack of trust with it. They're looking for something specific around it. And I think that's the left brain. It's like, it needs to look this way. And I've had so many women share, well, here's what happened, Kelly. And I'm like, okay, you just had communication. What is your expectation of it? Did you want something else? Did you want Jesus to smash through the window with a bright light? Like, what are you expecting? Because that's the thing that gets people in trouble. Their expectation that they're over controlled and overthinking something so natural and flowing, right? And you both know from an intuitive kind of psychic space, it's flow, it's movement. It's not like, okay.
Yeah. It Now, one of the things that you talked about just brought up this question about like ancestral trauma. When working with a spirit baby, is there a way to um, help that spirit not to bring that trauma into into the world with it, like
Yeah.
somehow to resolve some of it before?
That's an amazing question, because I do feel like with a lot of miscarriages, that tends to be a theme, is what I see. And this is Kelly's philosophy, because there's a lot of different energetic frequencies and philosophies. But what I've seen is lineage. And I have the ability, as of 3 years ago, I started to see ancestral links. I didn't see them before that. And, everything is changing. And so I welcome in this kind of connection. And what I see in the individual, let's say it's the woman or the man, typically is what I've seen in my sessions, where there's egg quality issues. They say egg quality or sperm stuff. Those to me are lineages. That has nothing, and I've seen it amazing stories where it was really confirmed through medical science. But I was like, it's a lineage thing. We can sit here and dissect the sperm and try to inject it and fix it, but there's a story of energy that's connected to something else. And how that heals, really, for the child to come in with not that wound, is the work that the parents are actually doing to clear it. And they're clearing it in different ways. And some people don't realize they're identifying it, like, oh, well, I have to go into my uterus, or I have to go inject it. And sometimes you do need a little bit of biological stimulation, but it doesn't matter if the energy is just not the same as the biology. Then there's nothing, it's like, oh, why didn't this IVF work? Or why didn't this work? Everybody said it's supposed to work. Everything is clear. The uterus is good. The sperm is the egg. I was like, because it's not just about the physical structures and the cells. There's another part to it. And I've seen these women go on a deep journey of clearing those parts. And again, it's a hard one. Lineage is really deep. We all have trauma in our history. I don't care who you are. And I don't know how far it goes back, but it impacts us in the present time. And we're connected to so much multi-dimensional realities. And some people will never know. And they're literally, this is the great thing, intuitively, they're literally acting it out in their life because they are healing it. Sometimes you don't have to go, get an ancestral healing or do something, but you could. I just recently had an ancestral healing through somebody that I did a podcast on, and it was really amazing experience, and it felt really nourishing, and it felt like, oh, maybe I needed that. And then do I come into that work by myself? And where's the benefit? Do I need to move forward with it? Do I just let it naturally come up? And so we have to be intuitive and trust, where are we now? And what is this awakening journey with baby being? What is happening? And so I do feel like it's very collaborative, especially if you're in partnership.
Yeah.
Some women come to me not in partnership, and they're like, typically using what I call creative conception methods, but they want their child. And I'm like, okay, then, it's not, it's going to be a little tricky and you got to figure it out. But in partnership, I'm like, it's not just the feminine or the womb holder. It's also the partner. And that's always missed, missed. It's like, but I've seen that in some sessions. I'm like, oh, this is about dad and his history. But it's like, oh, and some women get scared. They're like they don't want to go there. And I said, well, you can try to do the work for everybody, but I don't know. I mean, that's going to be whatever it's going to be, but that does come up sometimes. So yeah.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about this sort of amnesia that we kind of have, that we ignore this part of conception and the spirit and energetic work. Why do you think that is? And do you know of any examples of maybe was this sort of practice done by indigenous people, or Like, what is this something that is new, or is this something that has been around but maybe sort of buried?
Oh, this has been practiced way before our civilizations got super industrialized, right?
Mm,
It's really through like in that timeline, and I'm no historian, but through that timeline where everything became about, oh, let's give people lead and cocaine and like,
yeah.
let's give that, all this stuff that literally shut us down on so many levels generationally too, or the traumas, or even emotional, physical, how we treated people.
Hmm.
And so there's a story, and I'm still trying to get the real connection of the story in an Aboriginal community in Australia, where, and I have somebody like, because I want to research this, I'd like to put it in my book at some point. And the story is that in the tribe, it's the fathers that call in the spirit of the child. That's their job, and it's very natural to do that. And even if you look at some of history in more tribal communities, there's not a lot of birth issues. It's very rare until more industrialized people come in. All of a sudden, oh, the babies are sick, or the babies, they're stillbirths. It's like
Mm.
there's something in that coming back to that natural. So this is just one story, but I know, again, I have to do more research on that. And I'm trying to, because it does go back that where, in that history of time where it's more natural, and where, yeah, this amnesia comes really because of, technology, electromagnetic fields are really being impacted by people. So they get shut down or they're not clear. And I even had this with a woman the other day in a private session. This is why I like to look at the energy of people before we step into baby communication. And I felt like her crown was so wonky. It was just so off. And I was like, why is it off? And then I heard she lives by electricity, a very strong electromagnetic field. And then when I said to her, you must live by some power source, because it's
Mm.
literally, and she confirmed it. She goes, in her building, there was literally right next to her house and a whole power plant. And I
Wow.
said, not to like scare you, I don't know, maybe get a Faraday wall, I don't know. But it's hard because then I'm like, yeah, I want to say move, but I can't. It's her reality, her connection. But I also feel like, well, what can you do? And I was giving some tips, but I felt like, and she agreed, it affects her clarity and who she is and stepping into her body. It's like this loud, fuzzy, and she's, I would say, electromagnetic sensitive. And I even said to her, people that I've seen have what I call higher sensitivity, they tend to wear house shoes. And I said, do you wear house shoes? You must. She's like, I do, because it's intuitive. It's intuitive, and they don't even realize it. I can see people's intuition sometimes before they can claim it. And so, again, it's almost like tires on a car. You can put the shoes on, the field of energy through the feet. And so our electromagnetic energy is powerful. And so when it's congested, and even, I'm sorry, we know the phones and things, they're not good. They change the cells of people's body. And so we have to be very conscientious of what we're taking in, like anything, right? It's
Mhm.
like, should I eat that sugary chocolate cake all the time? Probably not. It's like, even with electronics, it's like, maybe I should, shut it off or put it away, or go, like me, I live in the mountains, connecting with the natural cycles. And so, yeah, coming back to that, um, ancient time, and even like we said, amnesia, but think about death. We know death inside us. Why would we not know the foundation of before life too? It's
Mm.
literally in us. It's in us. But we either have an amnesia, or we don't want to recognize it, or there's fear. Fear is like, okay. But me, the person, the soul I am, I get a lot of different perceptions all the time. And I'm like, oh my gosh. That's why I came up with the amnesia. I was just recently, it was like months ago, I was like, we have amnesia. What's happening? How can people not know? Like, how can we pretend to not know that there's a connection with our child? Like, and I want to demystify that. I want to like tell people, step up and claim it. Don't pretend to not know. You know inside, and trust that. Even if you're like, where's it going? Because I see success in that for women on their spiritual journey of life.
Yeah. I mean, speaking for myself, I have a hard time. I'm starting to trust my intuition a little bit more. It's been a long process. And I think a lot of people have experienced the same growing up in our society and sort of being programmed, and you're kind of taught in school and from those around you to suppress your intuition, your creativity, you know, because as a child, maybe you write on the walls or something, and then, you know, you're yelled at. So it's like, okay, I'm not supposed to do these things, or you express your emotions, you know, you express some anger, and the parent yells at you, you know, just reacts and is not really open to listening to what's underneath that. So as a way to protect ourselves as kids, we kind of, at least this is what I did, is closed in on myself, shut down, contracted diaphragm, holding breath, you know. And so I've learned over time, and I think a lot of people have, just to not trust the intuition, not even know what it is, and to look for quote unquote logic and facts, like what is, you know. And yeah, so do you find when working with clients that are most of the clients like very open to their intuitive self, or is part of the work that you do help guiding them to open up that intuitive part?
Yeah, I would say both parts, because you know, I'm thinking about when you were just talking, and I could feel your energy. I'm not trying to read you, but I do feel like a lot of your stuff comes from when you were a child.
Yeah.
You came in as a very starlight energy, and then you're like, the hell is happening here? And then it gets shut down, and then you're like, oh, but it's there, because intuition is every day. It's walking out, it's breathing, it's everything. So sometimes we're in awareness with it, sometimes we're not, but guess what? It's on automatic pilot. And it's fun to bring awareness to it, because maybe you're driving somewhere, or you run into somebody, you see something, and you made a different turn, and then you're like, oh, this is interesting. Well, look what just came from that, because there was something underneath that. And so I feel like I get these brain like pauses. You said something else. Oh, intuition. When I'm teaching, connecting with people with their own intuition, I feel like a lot of people that come to me are highly intuitive, and I've claimed it for them. I've seen it. I'm like, okay, they're really intuitive. Oh, but they have doubt and fear, which is fine. See their mental energy, but also I do get very high energy controlled, what people call type A personality, but I work great with those people. I'm like, bring me the most left-brained person. Go ahead, let's do this. But they have to be in like vibration, of course, too, because I'm not here to convince people that are completely shut down.
Yeah.
That is not my job. And I've met people, like sometimes when people find out what I do, they're curious, right? And like hanging out with, I'm meeting so many people. I don't go around announcing it unless it comes up. And then it's a deep conversation that goes somewhere. But I could tell if somebody is not available for it. I could just, it's so obvious to me. But again, I'm not there to convince them of anything. It's like you're doing you're in your own reality. And so, but intuition is natural. It's just natural as the farmers who were intuitive to plant the seeds. And I do feel like us coming back, trusting is really big. I put clients in spaces where I'm like, let's go into the frequency of trust. Trust around you, trust in yourselves, trust emanating from your heart. Where is your trust? Even if it's a little bit, you don't have to be 100%, but even give a little bit, and then see how all of a sudden your perception and reality becomes more of that. Instead of going into the negative, or, you know, that we all have that negative person, like no matter what you say, they're so negative because they've set their system to that through the nervous system, through their physical chemistry, through their consciousness. And that is their choice. That is their purpose, whatever they don't want to come into an awakened space. And I get a lot of clients that I would say are highly left-brained, lawyers, attorneys, medical doctors, all kinds, which are very, you know, but they're so intuitive in between there. But again, it's the culture. Got to be left brain, even when this whole, you know, we won't get into the pandemic thing, but it's like, look at the research, look at this. And I go, what if I don't want to look at any research? It's like, whoa, where do you belong? I'm listening to my inner voice and shutting down everything, because guess what? When I'm here and I hear you, everybody's so loud. And I'm like, oh, it was scary to feel the loudness and the fear of people. And And I had to hire a healer to work with in 2020 just to clearing through everybody. So I was like, I don't even know where I am. And just coming back to that center of me going, I don't even need to read anything. I'm just listening to the inner voice, because then it became this, remember, it's like, no, it's this, no, it's that. Well, if you do the research, you're a good person. Really? What if I don't do the research and I listen to my own inner voice? Oh, because that to me is the new future. That is the future, right? That's community. That's love.
You see, intuitively, I feel that. And then there's that voice that's like, well, what if you're wrong? Well, what about these, So, and that's the sort of, I think, and that's where the trust that you talk about, so many times my intuition would say, okay, don't do this or do this. And then that sort of learned survival mechanism would be like, no, you got to go do this, because this is what you were taught, and sometimes it could feel like a fish swimming against the water, at times. So yeah, there's always that sort of battle. I mean, at least for me, going on, and I suppose with a lot of people, just by I guess my measure is looking at the state of the world and the news and all this stuff. It seems like a good deal of the world is in that programmed way of thinking.
They are. They're hidden behind a wall of energy, and they're limited. And so people outside the wall know and see something different. And I think the community's growing, but even you said the fish swimming up maybe the water, I do feel like a lot of the freedom-minded outside people feel like they're swimming up the water. But there's something I know with all my being inside me that says, you're supposed to do this. There's a light, even though it's like, holy crap, I'm really, really scared. But that's okay, right? That's okay. That's where you're like, this is okay. And then you build your energy and attract more and more of that. I mean, it's incredible, like what you can build and attract through being your authentic self. And some people that are that are caught up in the brain hypnotism, I think the ones outside of that are just raising it, right? Without having to say, hey, your brain scrubbed, you need to do this. That's not working. That's very like, oh, my mommy says do this, my daddy says do this. It's very inner wound children, right? I do feel like politically our world is run by wounded children, right? And so to really go into that mature adult self is not easy for, I'd say, majority of people. And so everybody's feeling like, well, my opinion counts and it's important, and it is. But to tell someone to be something that they're not is really inauthentic. Like what you feel, who you are, what that inner connection is, that's everything. Because if you know you're eternal, this is just a moment here. It's like, this is just a moment. And when you know that and you really claim that and sense and feel into that and attract more community like that, you get it. And many of us are here to build the new world. Even if we're not here for it, we have to set the tone of energy for it. And of course, one of my big areas is children. It's like, well, how will these children come in, and what does that mean with their consciousness? And some children will come into closed-minded people. I mean, it happens, but they could be of high frequency coming into a low frequency. I mean, that happens quite often. There's not a lot of rules, right? The ego says, well, I'm a good person and I'm open-minded, so I should have a baby. Nah, it doesn't work that way. The world is not set up that way. There's so many other different pieces to that. And yet, we show up the best that we can to be a good human, to be kind, and to be, I feel like, in collaboration with people, like listening to people's stories. Everybody has a story and they want to be heard and helped by it. And this is where my bereavement community really comes in. These women have been through just horrific, tragic losses. And it's like, well, how can we just all be good listeners with each other without fixing anybody? It's like, you have an experience and you have a trauma. What can I do for you? Let me, even just being quiet and listening, or let me send you a cake, or let me just, love you from here, or here's a resource or something. I feel that for new community energy more and more is like, people just being who they are. Isn't that great? Like without feeling like there's any judgment really. It's really nice. I feel like
Yeah.
it's nice. That's my vision. I don't know what your visions are, but
I love what you just said there. Listening without trying to fix them. I think that alone will transform so many relationships
mm,
immediately, because now you're really hearing. You're not putting your opinion
mhm.
or what you think or to what they're saying.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Usually, I'm calling Ron at very late hours in the night. He's in the UK and I'm in New York. So at one time I called him at 4 a.m. in New York time. I don't know what time it was in New York, and I just unloaded a whole
Mm.
bunch. So and Ron will just say, "Okay, I'm all ears. Whatever you want to." And I never get any judgment or anything, and it creates a space to look at things in a more curious and open way and discover things newly,
Yeah.
you know, which is amazing. And that kind of, I mean, it makes sense that that's one of the things that you would like to, that you envision, that we're the world is going to do more of that, because you're able to see things, and you have this ability to see the energetic,
Mhm.
so you're going through the different layers of the
Yeah.
concepts and everything, and you know
Kelly, I have a few questions here that I was given beforehand.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the first ones was, what happens to the spirits of the babies who've been aborted?
Oh, big one. Here we go. I think that this is the question, right? Because I've worked many years in that space. I've even have a little episode on it. I've offered downloads about it, and it's a very complex area because really, if we look at, there's a woman who wrote a book called The Psychology of Abortion, and many years ago, I want to say her name is Paris something. It's a very thin book, but she actually talks about the archetypes and in history what it is about reproduction and how certain religious traditions have really stepped in and made it, whatever they want to make it. And so through the eyes of religion, it's a very different experience. But through my experience of what I've seen, um, souls aren't angry. there's no like, oh, I'm angry at you, you aborted me. And this is a really tricky frequency to really translate, because some people will not get it, because there are other agreements that we don't know about. And we always think that we in this earth realm have so much power to do and to make choices. And so internal agreements and individual experiences with people are very different. And there is pain, of course, through that experience. And I think it's mostly because of our cultures, right? And because some people will say, oh, you're killing, you're murdering, and it's such a messy like area. But what I've seen through termination, through fertility, and typically if I see terminations through fertility, I don't like just do individual like young people. They need like psychological, holistic healer support, which is very different. Because here's the thing: I tell women if they're going through termination, is that you're going to feel really horrible after. I don't care if it was a choice of consciousness and you did your deep healing around it. There's a death. There's a death, and there's grief, and there's feelings that have to be met that feel really important. And so the soul is the soul. It's pure, clean. And I do feel like there's something in that relationship, whether that baby wants to come back, which they can, absolutely. Some are very persistent to work with that energy and lessons. Sometimes it is lineage. Sometimes there's a lineage of loss in between there. And other times there's other mysteries, of course, in there, but the soul is whole. I've never once had a baby say that they hated their parents or they're a bad person. That's very ego. They want to heal together, and choices have to be made in really deep, ways. And so that's how that's how I've experienced it. And I'm trying to think. And sometimes there are ways that children tell me if there is termination, because some women don't tell me. Either they forget or they're ashamed. But sometimes the child tells me, hey, and I'm like, oh, okay, hey, this baby's coming through loss, and it feels like, and then they're like, oh, and I go, but that's not always a barrier to conception. And I know that's very confusing. It's not a punishment to conception. It's not, oh, you're bad, you did this. It's just, if we can look through the perception of reproduction in a different light, it becomes something different. But right now, there's so much religious indoctrination and shame, pain, and hate, because some people, here's a good one. A lot of people will say, and, oh, this baby deserves to be born, and they deserve to be adopted, right? But I'm in the birth psychology world. If you talk to adoptees, they are very upset. They don't think it's okay to adopt. So I feel like, remember, we're looking at both sides, and most people don't know that. If you get in there with an adoptee that's had major trauma through their adoption, they're not saying they want to be aborted, but what they're saying is that you shouldn't adopt either. So then we're in this place of going, okay, you don't terminate, you don't adopt. Well, I've known people in, can't say too much, but I've known people where they've had drug addiction and they've had multiple, which is that really bad? They're like, oh, either I'm going to do this or I'm going to have a drug addicted child. So it's a very tricky place, right? And whatever that agreement is and that connection. And then again, you take the adoptees group, right? And they're angry and they're like, well, I was adopted, because adoption is really intense too. And I have a lot of friends. I've attracted a lot of adopted good friends, which is fascinating, right? Foundational trauma, because I don't care if you're the best mother, father in your adoption, there's a primal connection to the root of existence. That's, my mom has left me. And that's the healing in this earth time. And that's just the truth. If we have foundational traumas, and I do myself, it stays with you because your nervous system has a certain experience, and then you have to heal it and work it out. And even what you were saying, we talked about earlier about even, being intuitive, the nervous system is a big part of that, because when your nervous system is working and healing and feeling embodied, guess what? You hear your intuition, you're more relaxed in the world. Things aren't so chaotic. But with a lot of foundational baby stuff, it's activating. It's like, you're not safe. Everything comes back to safety and survival. And so there's the long answer, but there's so much more to say about that. It's so individual. It really is. I hope that satiates the curiosity of the question around it.
Have before incarnation, do the spirits pick a particular mother?
That's what they say. And what I mean, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and are there soul groups? So this question comes about because many years ago I read Many Lives, Many Masters by Brian Weiss.
Yes. Good one.
And he talked about souls incarnating together, and in one life you could be a mother or the father or the child in different lives.
Well, here's the truth of it. We've all had past lives. How can we not? And they're not all human lives. Sometimes they're other realities, galactic energies. Some of us remember them, some of us don't. So we have to know that we're not just this clean slate and we've never had an experience. Why are there so many amazing inventor minds and creatives? That's just not random. And so I know I love his book and it's really great. And so I can't deny or confirm that, to be honest, because in my work and what I do, I don't know if it's really that important to know that information. And so we can look at that as a belief system and a philosophy that's put into place, and we can be in curiosity with it, I would say, just like death. We're taught when nobody knows when they're going to die. But is that really true? I don't believe that's true, because I've seen people intuitively before they've died, and their energy changes and the way they perceive the world changes. Maybe I see it. And so I know that when I come to that place, I was like, how could I not know? Honestly, and I've been telling me that for years. How could I not know? It just, again, it's coming back to going, it's a part of me. I know people say, oh, there's no birth memory. Well, from a scientific perspective, there is. You have a nervous system. You're born as a spine. So that means you have memory, even though you have no strong brain yet. We can look at that from science, and there's there's valid birth psychology, information on that. But if we look at a soul perspective, this whole season knows the body. There's a connection already. And so, again, mystery unknown, but we have we're born with information inside us, and we get to have a little amnesia. But some of us are like, wait a second, maybe there's like something else is happening, and maybe we have to be curious and open to it, even if it feels like, well, I don't know, but this is what I'm knowing into, or this is what I'm sensing into, or this is what I'm feeling into. And I do feel like we don't give ourselves enough credit to know that we were there when we were born, right? And again, some of us have trauma, so we're shutting it down, but it's there. It's in the body. It's there. I've had birth memories come through body work, and I was friggin' floored. No idea. But it was so vivid to me that I was like, let's go find the doctor records and 100% prove it. This is how I was born, and this is what it felt like. Like, that's how convincing it really is, because we have the stories. They're a part of us, the good and the bad.
Can you talk a little bit about, I guess maybe, I don't know if this would be the right term, conception trauma? Like, is there, like, if the soul it's coming into the body, or whatever, however it's happening, when it's coming into this existence, I'm imagining that, I mean, is that a traumatic experience? And is there some way to go back and sort of redo that experience through your work?
Well,
does that make sense?
Absolutely. Okay. You can go into physical experience, body regressions through rebirthing. As an adult. I don't do that work. That's a whole other field. It's awesome. I learned a little bit of parts of that when I studied somatic psychology and pre and perinatal psychology, because they put people through that. They actually, I was a witness to it in the group of therapists, but it is possible, and a lot of people are in that space doing it to relive it. But like I said, my memories have just come randomly throughout my lifetime, especially after 30, I noticed, and I'm 47 now. So it's been, many years. And so yeah, your memories are there, your information is there, and there are ways to, I think it's called rebirthing. There's something else you said. What else did you say in there?
The shock.
Yes, that's what it was. Yeah. So the shock, I really feel, and I saw this the other day, I really do feel like anybody that's born into Earth feels kind of traumatic, even if it's a nice, happy home birth. Because I had a really good home birth with my second, and it's a lot coming into a body, merging with a spirit, and then feeling the world. You instantly feel in this kinesthetic world. You hear, you connect. And so that foundation of birth is so powerful. And you're crying, not you're crying because that's what your body does, and you're slimy and you're cold, and then you're like, where's my source? Oh my gosh, I'm coming. Like, where's my mom? Like, where's my mom? And then, maybe you're given baby, or maybe baby's taken away. And baby taken away that's trauma right there, because the baby doesn't know. It wants to go to its mom. And even if there's an emergency, and that does happen sometimes, but the baby is still left with trauma. And this is where we have craniosacral therapies and other baby therapies, which are so phenomenal. That's another vision I would love to, like, if I had enough space and time. I worked with infants before on that level, where they were healing through their medical traumas, and they do. You get them under age 1 and even 1 and 2. They don't have to walk around with the baggage that maybe we had to. And it's just, it's incredible. And so, so I do feel like, being born is really intense, and coming into this body is different for everybody. But I feel like that soul before, it doesn't have a body yet. So it's a different level of consciousness. It's not, but once it's entering more in the body, and see, here in pregnancy, the soul is not fully integrated, I feel, into the body. Yeah, it's kind of there, and it's a possibility, but the soul is like running around free. It's very hard for our brains to understand that. It's not like there's a soulless child there. It's the soul can be in I feel like many fragments at once. I could be over at, Auntie's house. I could be over here, and it's like, oh, and then you're like being touched by that energy. So, and there's a lot of philosophies, like you said, there's one philosophy, everybody always asks me this. So does the soul come into the body once it hits the earth? And we could say that, but I'm not about being so trapped down. I don't do my work that way. Things have to be movable. And that's why I say belief systems. And this is really from my experience of what I've seen with people and my own soul connection to that reality. So yeah, a lot of curiosity and yet mystery in that.
Yeah. Can you maybe expand a little bit on the, you had mentioned before that it doesn't have to be so specific, like some of the storyline of the story of the soul baby. It doesn't have to be like very specific. And is that because you just need enough to work with the parent, but really is it more about moving energy?
Because some things aren't really relevant. Like somebody
Yeah.
comes to me and says, "Hey, Kelly, what's my baby's past life?" I go, "I don't know." If your energy body says, "Hey, there's a past life issue, let's look at it," I look at it as a tool of healing. I'm not going in there to go, "Okay, let's look at your past lives," because then I have to access a whole other energy that's really not serving the space. Because my work doesn't say past life regression or past life work, ancestral work, but if it comes in, I feel like, okay, it's coming in, we're going to look at it. So, or if you really want to go look at it, here, I have resources. Go check that out. That feels important to you. But I really want to sit with people and go, what is happening? What is the theme of their conception? And specifically, let's say, why are they having multiple miscarriages? Why, what is happening? What can we do together? And usually with more one-on-one, there's a story that unfolds more and more, because sometimes in the first session, I may say something that could shut someone down, right? Not purposely, because I'm very gentle. I treat people like newborns in my sessions. You don't get any weird dark, there's a dark shadow, or you don't get crystal ball stuff in there. And so I want them to open to the next part. And that intimate connection, when I see them open, there's like really incredible information. And this year I've noticed I've had a lot of, because they come through my program and we stay together in my membership, there's different things we do. And then I'm seeing these women and they were scared. They were having miscarriages. They're all like moving into pregnancy and they're still scared. And I said, okay, just so you know, you're going to be scared most of the pregnancy. Just accept it. It's not about going, oh, you're going to be fine. Let's see. You're going to feel fear. You're going to feel grief. But guess what? It's okay. You're going to feel love. And you're going to feel whatever you're going to feel. I mean, that's what it's about emotionally. We have to feel what we feel without judging it, without,
Yeah, I like what you said there, because about feeling whatever comes up, whatever we feel. Like I had experienced yesterday where I had this huge, really intense fear of death. And on top of that was like the mind, like, oh, why are you feeling this? Or like, how do I get away from this? Or, trying to figure out, escape it, and like just allowing to like feel, oh, I feel really afraid of death right now. Like just to actually, it was something about that I don't know. It helped me to see it in a different way. It helped me to be, I guess the word would be compassion, like more connected to that part that's feeling, there was like a,
yeah, it's uncomfortable at times when we get triggers, and it's like, because it feels so in the moment. This is never going to end. And I've experienced that feeling of death many, many years ago, because I actually experienced this major death in my life of two people within weeks apart, my mom and my older brother. And he was young, like literally 3 weeks apart. And that pushed me into this other reality with death and the relationship with death. And yeah, there was grief. It was like a lot of grief and anger and confusion. And then something happened though. I do feel like when people around us, physical humans, die, I feel like it's a key to something else. We get to transform into something else, or we get to be angry, pissed off, and in our darkness. But here's the thing: if my mom didn't die, I wouldn't be doing medical intuitive work, because she took up a lot of space, and that's a whole other book. She wasn't a well woman, mentally, physically. And so I realized when she died, I told myself, I've always been medically, intuitively like connected with people. Why don't I just do that work? And because I was taking care of her a lot. And when her energy cleared, I was able to step into it more deeply. And it's been such a profound journey with people and what's being revealed to help them bring to their medical doctors and even their naturopaths. And getting confirmation is fun for me. I'm like, yeah, tell me what they say about what I say, or they'll say, oh, this test. I go, that test is broken. It's not working for you, you know. And of course, I'm not a doctor, medical professional, and I don't claim to be. But I state that too. I want people to be intuitive on what they're connecting with. And so the death piece, here's the secret: the death space is right here in front of you. It's not this far away thing. But that's okay. You merge with knowing that life and death are not so separate as we've been taught. And it doesn't mean it doesn't bring grief and fear and anxiety. That's okay. That's the thing. We don't give permission. What if I feel like crappy one day and I feel crappy the next day and I feel crappy the next day? Oh, my body, I feel uncomfortable. Something's changing. I don't have to know all the answers to that. I'm just going into self-care with it, just listening and being present, because I do feel our emotions is every reason why people get sick. We're not emotionally expressive enough, to be honest, especially women. Let's suppress it. And even male, let's suppress it. Let's suppress it. Oh, look, everybody's sick. Oh, that's weird. Because the emotion, and I've confirmed this with a lot of medical doctors I've spoke to. I go, what do you think about that? And a lot of them like, yeah, you're right. It's like we have these physical symptoms, but that emotional expression underneath it is like, it's just not allowed. It's not allowed. Got to go somewhere.
Yeah.
How do you work with mothers who have postnatal depression?
So I don't work with women in after, typically. So unless they really, unless I saw them in conception, pregnancy, and they're like, Kelly, I really trust you. I get this sometimes. Can we have like a little session, or can you help me? And I had postpartum depression with my firstborn. And I've done podcasts about this, but I feel like when we go into postpartum depression, I feel like it's a death because there's a rebirth of mother, and it's not recognized through some experiences. Like no one tells you that when you're childless for a long time and you become a mother, and now you're just, oh my gosh, you're so responsible for this child, and you didn't really get a chance to let the old part of you die for this new part to come through. It's scary, and it's horrible, and it's dark. And there, you know, we do need help. We need people. You know, we need community when after we give birth, especially in America. It's very like you just do your own thing, and that's why a lot of postpartum depression, a lot of women do die. It's very high here, and especially certain cultures and races. It's just, I don't know. It's like we need people, and so that postpartum time is so crucial to have our community. And I realized the first time I didn't have that because I had an unwell mother who couldn't care for me, and I had family members that didn't really care. But it really played out. I didn't realize how that played out. And then so the second time I'm like, nope, the community's coming knocking on the door with soup and bread, and they're going to take the baby when I'm just tired and I can't nurse properly. And it's like I set it all up, and guess what? The second time was fine. Nothing around any depression, nothing dark. You know, I got to the point where with my firstborn, I had birth trauma. I had second-degree tearing in my vagina, which was horrible. And then I had this baby, and then my husband was going back to work. I had nobody, and I was literally rocking in the chair. I should die. I'm like, I should die, but I don't know how to die. I'm like, I can't kill myself, but I need to die. And I would put my son on the bed, walk outside, and just be like, I just cry. And I was like, something's wrong with me. And it was beyond the 2-week blue period. And so I connected with my friends who were healers and therapists, and I just talked it out. So much talking it out. Like, you know, they weren't like, oh, you need to go get help. You need to go on meds. It was like, let's just talk it out together and just love each other. And they were just loving me and letting me just talk it out. Like, this is how I felt. And I just didn't realize how I wasn't being nurtured like by my parents, right? We want that. And it just never really was that way anyways. It just wasn't like, and now I felt like abandoned and alone, and it was like real inside me, but it needed to heal. So then I could step up to be a good mother to my son and be present for him. And then the next one, my other son, just to be present for them and to change the lineage, to do it different. Because I'm all into attachment, co-sleeping, you know, natural things. Like, I'm not going to do all this stuff that everybody wants you to do to your child. I'm not going to do it because it doesn't feel right. They're just born natural, whole. And so, yeah, so I don't specifically work with people after. I would say there's other amazing people that do that, but that's my experience just came out of that. There you go.
How would you say being a mother has influenced the work that you do?
I think in a major way, because with my firstborn, I had so much pre-birth communication in pregnancy, and it was really fun. And he was a very wild-spirited boy. And I even saw what he looked like, and he did look like that when he was born. And he's such a wild-spirited boy. He's very kinesthetic, physical boy. Whereas my second one was more gentle, like just gentleness and ease and calmness. And he's still, I feel like he's still a little baby because he's 5. But people stop me everywhere I go with him. Like, they just look at him and he's like, there's just something about his gentleness and ease and sweetness. And it's funny that people see that. I love that they see that. But I feel like it's molded me a lot because I get it. Man, motherhood is freaking hard as hell. I mean, there were some dark times in the beginning. And then, you know, actually having children was one of my biggest fears. And people think, oh, the spirit baby medium. But I was like, I had pregnant phobia, which I think because I had that trauma, I think there was a foreseeing in that. I knew something was going to be off because I had early trauma. I had accidents with my body. And so then I'm like, how is this going to play out? I'm like really freaked out. But I always say my firstborn broke my second chakra open because it brought me to a deep level of healing that I don't think I could have gotten any other way. I really don't. And so I get what it's like to have those hardships. I know what it's like to nurse. I know what it's like to birth. I know what it's like to birth in the hospital, not by choice, by a transfer of a home birth with my first. And I know what it's like to be treated really, really badly. And I also know what it's like to birth at home through midwives and people that are just present. And so, and again, I want to say there's no right or wrong way to mother because mothers are so hard on themselves. There's so much, you know, judgment or fear. And I don't go into that energy. I think because I'm like, my older one is 11 now. I've been doing this for a long time. But I see new moms, they get so freaked out because they want to do everything right. I get it. And it's stressful and tiring, but it's really my sons have brought this work into existence for sure.
Yeah.
They have. It was them because in the beginning, I was always did energy work and I was like, I read people's energy. It was very easy for me. But then moving into pregnancy and stuff, this whole world was created based on them. So, yeah.
That brings me to ask about the great lessons and teachings that we can get from children and babies.
Oh my gosh. Yes. I mean, when I was opening to conceive my children, it felt very important for me to bow down to the sacred soul. Not that I deserved to have them and then they had to come to me and I was going to make them come to me. I literally feel like bowing to your knees, to your ankles, put your head on the ground, like I am here to receive this soul. And I'm just here without overthinking, without overanalyzing. That to me feels really big. And that we are not the teachers of our children. I feel like they're guides on some level where we just can't mess it up. Where I want them to know their own soul's truth and purpose without me over intervening too much, which is always a tricky one, right? And so, but how do I do that? What also there's rules on earth. Like, I've had to nurse, change your diaper because you weren't there yet. And then as you're growing and maturing, finding your creative way, finding your own light energy still in that space and doing it with imperfection, making mistakes, being angry. I have a very different setup. I think a lot of us growing up, we were upset or angry. We just like dealt with it. But like if my children are upset or angry, I don't take it away from them. It makes people uncomfortable. Oh, no, you're okay. And I found myself saying that. And I'm like, don't say that. My son was really frustrated yesterday. His scooter wasn't working. He was having a meltdown over it. And I'm like, let's just take a moment. We're on the beach. And I just rubbed his back and I'm like, Kelly, you don't have to do anything right now. You're just letting him have. I have to say that because I want to take care of everybody. He's just having an experience and I'm rubbing his back and we're just being kinesthetic and I'm sinking into my feeler. We don't have to talk about it. And male minds, there's not a lot of talking, not to be like, but there's a different language. Like the female brain is like language, process. Male is very physical, kinesthetic. So I'm just rubbing his back. And then I said, I think we're going to head back down the trail. And after just that moment, it was literally, I really didn't do much of anything, but just show up and rub his back. After that, he was like sunshine. He was totally fine. It wasn't like we had to process it anymore. Yeah. He had it, he dispersed it, he was present, and then everything was like, okay. And let's say he was still uncomfortable. It's fine. I'm not going to make a big deal about his emotional process. He needs it.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that because as parents, we can tend to get into the fix it mode. Like you got to feel another way. And I remember my 6-year-old daughter, she was crying and crying over something, and then I was kind of telling her to, okay, that's enough. And at one point she said, you don't like me when she said, you don't love me when I'm crying. And I was like, oh, I realized what I was doing. And I had to kind of
good.
Yeah, sometimes
it's good that she said that to you.
Yeah, she's good at that.
Yeah. How old is she now?
She's 6. This wasn't long ago.
When did she turn 6? When did she turn 6?
August. She's gonna be 7. She's gonna be 7 next month. So.
What is her birthday?
August the 5th.
Oh, because my son's August 24th, but he's gonna be 6. They're a year behind.
Okay. Yeah, my son is August 20th, and I'm August 28th.
Wow. Oh wow! Look at that, Virgos.
Yeah.
Leo and Virgos, but I love, that's what's great. She reflected it back. And I do that too. I'm like, because when my older's like, you don't love me. And I'm like, oh God, he's upset with me. I said something. So now it's like, I don't love you, but it's like, that's their language. They don't know how else to do it. And then again, I have very kinesthetic voice, especially the older ones. So everything is like, I pet the face, rub the hair and just be quiet. Like it's, we don't, I like miss that. Just to like, oh, let's just sink in and be like, but sometimes our children annoy us and I'm just like, can you just be quiet already? And then sometimes we're repairing it. I go, I'm sorry, mommy's angry right now, obviously. And I've done that too. They've seen me scream and lose it, but it's good because so do they. It's like normal. We're gonna, we're gonna be real with each other. That's what we need.
Yeah, I've had some amazing moments, especially with my 10-year-old son. He's on the spectrum. He's pretty high functioning, autistic, and so he expresses in his own way, and sometimes it's what seems to me like difficult for him to regulate his emotions, and he will like hold his breath and just go and just like get really upset and just start crying. And he will say, like, he doesn't like when I critique. So if I say, oh, maybe don't do this, and he will say, oh no, and he'll start crying. And then he knows that if the emotion comes up and he expresses it in sort of the way that he does, a lot of times those around him, like his older sister or me, we won't like it. So now he says, stop. He's telling himself to stop. So and then he gets a little frightened about the emotion as well. So one day I was with him and I had the awareness, and I've been doing this just to be with him, and I could relate so much. I understood what he was, to a certain extent, what he was going through. And so, I would tell him, okay, that's okay. The emotion, you could think of it as a wave, just when it comes up, I'm here with you. Let it come up. And slowly he started to breathe and let it up,
Nice.
and let it come out. And I was feeling it as well. And then I just watched him exhale. And he kind of,
What a great daddy you are. Seriously, because that's a big deal. I grew up, my older brother was probably not diagnosed Asperger's by far. So he never had that. It was very hard to see that because I saw like something's off and nobody's addressing it. But the sensory system was so overloaded all the time, and it comes off in certain ways. And I do feel like as parents, especially when they're young, we need our regulation. If we're not regulated, guess what? Your child's not regulated. And so I invested in, and I learned somatic psychology, but in 2021, I did like a whole 12-week program. I'm like, I'm going to get more regulated with my nervous system, feel safe in my body. And then, so when my kid's like having a fit and I'm not tapped into it, I'm just regulating where I am. And I'm like, okay, they are who they are, but it may take, certain, because we're so connected to our children. And so I think it's amazing. I don't think children get that, right? It's like, I don't, especially on the spectrum, it's like, I don't really understand, your experience. But even if they're not on the spectrum, we don't understand what it's like to live in everybody's bodies.
Yeah.
We're really looking at that. And it's like, and how they're coping and regulating themselves again, because on spectrum, I feel like it's the sensory system is like, just, it can be so, I could see the energy of different people like that, especially children. And I could see where their energy, I'm like, oh, some children feel too much. And I'm looking going, wow, it literally feels like they're just touching everybody all the time. Like that's exhausting. But they may not be knowing how to regulate, or it may feel safer, or there's something in there. But we do have to teach children to go, oh, hey, where are your feet right now? Right?
Yeah.
Before they get to that dysregulation, or oh yeah, where are your toes? And then it brings their energy. And there's ways to be, of course, playful. And then, but it's an experiment too, it's like my older son used to have these, like, he kind of regresses to 2-year-old at times, and he has these meltdowns. And I'm like, and he wasn't verbal for the first few years of his life. And so there's a lot of stuff in there, and I'm going, and he regresses back to that sometimes, which I hear is very common from a child psychologist. But I'm like, okay, we're working on it because he gets very like physical. So I'll get this and I'll just be like, I'll get like, I'm like, ow, that like hurts. But then it's like, okay, I know you're angry, obviously, but it's like, then we're just kind of, I'm listening because sometimes I don't have the answer. Right. And I'm like, all right, let's see where this goes. Parent experiment 101, because I'm not doing it how my parents did it. I'm not. So I want to talk it out. I want to like be there. I don't want to like, oh, just go to your room. You're punished. That's what I did when I was a kid. Just go to your room. You're in trouble. I'm like, that gonna do? Sit in my room by myself.
Yeah, and it's always the wrong time.
Yeah.
Like now you're gonna.
I know, exactly, totally.
Is that one of the reasons why sometimes children, or even adults as well, they go into a place where it's crowded and the energy is just too much?
Oh yeah.
And they can't cope with it. Because I remember as a child, I found it very difficult in crowds, in shops. I didn't enjoy it at all.
Because you both of you are empaths. So empaths, that you absorb your environment, and nobody teaches you how to be a good empath. And by that, I mean creating barriers, boundaries, self-care. And so think about it, you go into crowds, everybody's electromagnetic fields, the items around you, even the electronics, everything is loud. And I know for many years, I would retreat and hide, even though I'm like, someone's like, you want to go to a concert? I'm like, nope. But this person is great. Nope. You won't see me in large crowds. And once in a while, I'm getting better, I would say, because I need to feel safe in my body. And we just went to this Renaissance fair, and we're sitting in the bleachers. Literally, people are knee to knee. And I'm like, and I look at my husband like, I think I'm gonna have to go really soon. He's like, but I was like, let me just do a little behavioral therapy on myself. And I says, here's the thing. I told my husband, he knows me. We've been together for a long time. I said, you sit here in a crowd of people, it means nothing to you. I sit in a crowd of people and I feel all their everything, their feelings, their thoughts, their experiences. I'm not doing it on purpose. And so I'm learning how to be, a highly sensitive person without absorbing everybody's stuff, knowing how to move with it, like the wave of the water. Sometimes it'll knock you, but then you readjust it and shift around it. And if I'm uncomfortable, I'm just walking away from it. And my children are pushing me out more into the world because, again, and I'm doing the nervous system work, I feel safer because I was never safe as an infant and child, which is why I had autoimmune disorder in my 20s, and I was really sick for a long time. And that's what happens when you're on high alert as a child. You use cortisol, your immune system crashes. And then you're an adult going, why do I have this autoimmune thing? That's just like, oh man, this is bad. And so again, I'm integrating going, I don't want my children to have that. I don't want my children to have chronic pain. I don't want my children to feel unsafe in their body, even though I know it's tricky in this world, but I'm gonna do the best I can.
So can you talk about, do you have a radio show? Is that correct? Or am I getting that wrong?
Podcast,
a podcast,
yeah.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about your podcast?
It's called Spirit Baby Radio, and I'm up to, I think as of next week, 142 episodes. And all the episodes I have me, and a lot of episodes, but I also have a lot of different fertility experts, healers, spiritualists, talking about, even there's a whole section, I've even separated it around all the birth loss and death stories, conception, like how to be good at Spirit Baby 101, communication, dream work, past life. There's so much stuff, like, so for men, for women. So yeah, that's my podcast. I've been running now for many years.
Oh wow. Yeah. How did you get into that?
Well, this is funny. I was doing podcasts. I started it in 2016, but I didn't fully step into it 2017. And I think podcasts were still like, who really knew what they were. I just literally, it really was like divine intervention. I sat there and I went, I should have a podcast. I should call it Spirit Baby Radio. And I literally wrote 10 episodes on paper. And someone said, if you can have 10 live episodes, you have a podcast. Actually, I wrote 50. Sorry, I wrote 50 and I got through the first 10. And then I just kept going. And I realized I like speaking. I like video. And I think that's why writing my book has been so hard. And I did hire someone to help me because I was like, I'll get all the words and letters. Like, I know what I want to say, but sometimes how is it coming out? So I feel like the podcast, I do feel like when people connect with the podcast, they're getting an experience, a frequency that's very specific to their journey. Some people have messaged me like, I got pregnant listening to your podcast. I'm like, great. Or it brought me to such inspiration and healing. And I think that's what it's about, because there's always possibility. I've saw women come to me and say, the doctor said, no. The doctors say, no. This fertility says no. And they have children. So what does that mean?
Yeah. I mean, there is something about you that's like I feel like at certain parts, like I could feel the energy. I felt like my spirit baby was being, like you were talking to that, or there was like, I just felt like this, I don't know, thing happening. I can't explain it, but
I love it.
Yeah.
Are you having more children?
No.
That was a quick. That was a quick no. Okay, tell the baby that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have any plans. But
I hear you.
Yeah. So we're about almost at an hour and a half. Ron, did you have any more? Was there any more audience questions?
I think you got through most of the audience questions, but there was one thing I would like to ask. It's about if we're going to go in humanity the new way, and you talked about at the beginning the cranial sacral therapy. What other ways in regards to, so a lot of times children they go to nursery at 3 or 4, they may not spend a lot of time with their parents. What's the new way going to look like from birth up into through their early years? And how can we begin this process now, those who are parents, those who work with children?
Yeah. So it really does begin with birth. It's birthing in an empowered in our own way, whether it's hospital, birth center, even free birth. People have to feel and have permission to be intuitive. And I know it's a hard one to come through, but really beginning from birth. And then I really feel like attachment parenting. And there was Dr. Jay Gordon said that attachment parenting is the first 6 years of life. So it's not just, hey, my infant's 4 months old now, let's go send them to college. I feel like that's our culture, right? Send them into the get the nanny, send them into the daycare, whatever. It's like, what's happening? We're and even in the school system, unless you're doing more of a Waldorf system, we're forcing children into being adults really at a very young age. Like, let's get their diapers off. And it's like, what is happening? And so attachment parenting, the first 6 years of life, pulling your child in doesn't make them a bad person. It makes them know how to individuate and they feel safe.
Yeah.
There's this opposite idea that I'm spoiling them. There's no such thing really to that level, unless you're spoiling them by having the nanny buy them stuff and you never see them. That's a spoil. But if you're taking them in, just being present with them and connecting in that way, I feel like that attachment parenting is so important. And I did some of that work before I stepped more deeper into this. So I got a little energy idea on like what that world was about before I had it myself. And, sometimes there are things we can't do, like, oh, you had the cesarean birth, or I'm not nursing, but there are other ways to build attachment and repair. And then you have these children and it's like, what are you, are they going into the daycares? Are they going into the preschools? Are they going into the school system? We have to question that now, especially after 2020. What are we teaching our children? What does it look like? And does it make sense? Not just go, oh, well, they're going to eat that crappy lunch and they're just going to go to school and I don't care because that's what I did. But we're trying to do better. Someone said that once. I was like, what do you mean? We're trying to do better. Like, how are we doing the better? But we do have to be highly intuitive and experiment. And sometimes it means like you're swimming up the stream, as you said earlier, you're like, oh, but there's some, like, you could be nervous and scared, but then maybe that light inside you is like, no, you know what you're doing. Keep going. I found that light, even in trauma and chaos. That light inside me is like, it's always been right. Even in choices where I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much fear. This is so triggering. I'm like, breathe, you're okay. It's okay. And so, being loving to ourselves, giving ourselves permissions to screw up and to make repair or do something. And so the future will come back to natural healing. Don't you see it now? Don't you see people more into holistic awareness? I mean, really looking at Eastern philosophies, it's actually ancient medicine compared to Western, but Western has taken over. And there's a whole other conversation why that's happened, which maybe we could talk on the outside. I don't want to talk too much about it here. But even school systems, even, all these different systems changing, they have to break. And it's going to get ugly because how are we going to grow new things through it? Think about it. Do you notice that a lot of people right now are gardening that have never gardened before?
Yeah.
Because intuitively something else is merging. It's not just coincidence. It's not because someone else is doing it. We know, and we're listening to those subtle things. Like, why in 2021 did I do all that nervous system work? I'm like, it makes sense because I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it for the community that I work with as well. And so I'm like, oh, but I'm following my instincts. In 2019, I was offered an opportunity to study about death. And I remember feeling like, and I remember going, I have to learn it now. And so I was like, no, let's do it in 2020, the other half. And it was with a friend. I go, no, like I have to learn in 2019. And then I realized because there was the death energy in 2020. And I remember, like, I didn't have any major prophetic things about 2020, but what I did feel was, when the new year came, I got really, really sick a lot right before everything. And then I also noticed I didn't book anything for the whole year. Like, I usually go Airbnb here or there. I was like, something told me don't book anything, which I couldn't have anyways. So I was like, oh, okay. It's like, and then you realize, oh, the instinct, the time traveling energy, like we know things.
Yeah.
But it's okay to go, again, Jesus smashing through the window. Oh, I needed to be that clear is ridiculous. We have to get out of that way. And it's okay not to know things either. It's fine. You're just following your instinct, your life. Because I do feel like even with babies, coming back to that, I feel like pre-birth communication, spirit baby communication is an instinct. It's an instinct. Everybody that's a parent has that instinct. And I'm like determined to let people see that that is true for them.
Hmm. Yeah, you said a lot of things there that ring true for me, that, especially about the school system, how we still have this sort of punish reward competitive school system. And I see that in my son's school, who's on the spectrum. They like try to force him to think this way, and it puts so much pressure. They have something called, if you do the work correctly, you get pickle time, which means you get to pick the activity. If you don't, you get catch up, which means you have to catch up in class.
Oh, wow.
So my son's always terrified. I got to get pickle. Like, I got to complete it. And, he has so much pressure. And, just, it doesn't work. But on the other hand, I can feel and intuit what you were talking about the things are changing. There are, like you said, people are growing things, and there are this community is growing. Yeah. And I think the way that we're doing things now, the structure is not going to be able to hold up, much longer. And I think we are going to need those people that are doing, like you, that are doing the work, that you're doing, to be there to, for this new way to come. It really does feel like something is shifting. And before, I would see it and say, oh, I don't know. But now it's like undeniable. It's like right there.
We're in the labor right now. Something is being birthed.
Yeah.
And that new world is literally right in front of us. It's that frequency that's still aligning to see it actually come into physical manifestation. But we all have to keep going, yes. Even if we're like, I don't know, yes. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, because it's the mind, the ego, the old frequency that's like, we're going to keep things the same. And it's like, okay, but you may have to do drastic things in your life to up level that. And I know I have, and I'm going, deep breaths, nervous system work. You're changed. It's changing. Like change is a death, right? It's like, oh my gosh. And there's grief and there's new energy in there. And I feel like we come back to going, what are we leaving for our children's future? Right? That's the big push. It's like, maybe it would be different if I didn't think that way, but I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm submerged in the world of children. Not just with my own, but with all these baby beings that I've just connected with. And I'm like, there's a mystery in that. I was like, why do I do this work? What is that? Like, why me? But also I'm going, okay, I'm listening. What are we doing? What do you want to do? You want to raise your dad's consciousness? You want to come and be born, but it's a struggle? Okay, what could I do? Let's do this. Let's see what comes from that.
So Kelly, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you wanted to talk about?
No, I feel like I felt like we literally talked about 5 different podcasts in one. Like really, like there's so many like amazing topics, and both your energies, how you sustain the spirit baby realms is really powerful, and especially as males, I should say, because I don't get to hear a lot of males talking about that stuff, and it feels really, really important, not just the women speaking about it, So yeah, that's all we've covered it all.
Thank you very much. I mean, I think to be in this space, and Ade and I talk about, we're always learning, and to go into areas that we feel that we need to learn about. And speaking with you has, I think, really raised a lot of issues, raised a lot of ideas, and we talk about the new way forward. And I think it's up to us to bring it into fruition. And not wait for others. What's going on inside of yourself? What is your instinct telling you? From your tree, what fruit are you going to bear? And I think that's a really beautiful way to look at things.
And you just remind me of like, we have to break our own belief systems. And that's where that feels like, oh my gosh, am I going against something? Right? I'm not being good girl or good boy. And it's like, oh, but wait a minute. But it's interesting because then you see the construct that you've been pulled into and a part of, and then you're like separating more and more and more. And I do feel like 2020, 2021 was to really awaken the light people more to say, hey, it's time.
Yeah.
I just get chills saying that. Like, it's time. Go. And you're like, wait, what am I doing? What's happening? Wait, I got to go right now. And then it's like, yeah, it's time to deconstruct all your belief system from religion to school to government to people to health. And then you're like, but I'm going to die. But it's like, no, deconstruct now.
Yeah.
You'll know when it comes. Like, you don't have to have all the answers, create as you go, right? And I like to use this word co-creation with fertility, but I feel like it's with life. We're in co-creation with our life at every moment. You are creating. I created the room I'm in. I created this, space. I created the home, the food, the interactions with people. And we are continuing to be in co-creation, right? All the time with everything. And yeah, we have to remember that and then go, okay, it's okay if I don't see too far ahead.
Yeah.
You'll know. You're safe enough to know what the next steps are, right? I feel like we are. I feel like I trust people if they're, centered and connected and
yeah. And to know that we are supported as well. Sometimes I forget that there's so much support there. And yeah.
And to be bold to ask for support. I know who I was a few years ago is not who I am now. And I just freaking love who I'm becoming because I feel safe, strong in my body. And I had to go against a lot. I live in the city. I'm sure you both live in the city. I had a different thought process when everything happened. And I was like, I can't even really talk about it with anybody because I see something else.
Yeah.
And they see something else. And I'm like, and I'm not here. And then I started attracting the people that saw with me and more and more and more. And it's a big party around the world, more and more people, because I know right now, 100% matter of fact, I'm only attracting those people right now. I know it's like in my friendship circles, even in this space now, I'm like, I know it. And I'm meeting like incredible people that are of that frequency. And I'm like, okay, this is new earth time. Let's weave it together and see what happens. Like, yeah, you're here. It's like, go. Like I said, it's go time. And yeah, like just looking at my life in the best years, I'm like, I have no filter anymore to just pretend. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if somebody's like, oh, they're being flirty, I'm just like, are you flirting with me? Instead of going, oh, I think they are, or I shouldn't say anything. I'm just like saying it. I'm like, oh, I have like this thing. And something else even happened around, I won't say too much about it, but it was something about the agenda. And somebody's like, oh, isn't this cute? And I'm like, no, that's not cute. Like my, I'm like, no, that's not. And I'm like, oh gosh, what am I saying? And then I ask my friends and people when there's new people, I'm like, did I sound harsh or bold? This is my judgment. And they're like, no, not at all. And I'm like, wow, it's like to be an empowered woman made me feel scared because I never was able to do it to that degree. But I'm like, okay, but I'm wearing her and I really love her. And I'm like, yes, like, let's do it. I think about my community. I think about my children. I don't have time to be the victim, or I don't have time to be taken down. I will not be taken down. I will be a sovereign being. I will listen to my light force. And that is all with me. And that's the instinct. That is, spirit baby. That is everybody. And I want to be of service to really promoting that people connect with that space of love, that connect with their own higher frequency force, and just do it. Be in action, be in relationship with it.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I that resonates, and I'm slowly getting there. I still have that sort of feeling of and I talked to Ron about this, that undeserving, not good enough, lingering thing that's starting to fall away, but yeah, it's feeling a little bit more in my power, more feeling more access to that recently, very, very recently. Yeah. Well, thank you, Kelly. It was a pleasure. I didn't know what to expect today. And
I always love that. Nobody knows what to expect from me. I don't even know what to expect from me.
yeah.
Thank you, Kelly. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I'm so happy that we got in contact, and to hear you speak has been joy.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I feel like we're going to have more conversations and connections together, maybe on the outside.
Yeah.
I hope so, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I hope so.
It's been amazing. Thank you so much.